Hello, and welcome to the Trauma-Informed Practice for CASA Volunteers, a TBRI overview training. This training was developed by Changemakers Leadership Institute on behalf of Northeast Georgia CASA and is based on the trauma-informed evidence-based practice, trust-based relational intervention. This training takes approximately 2 hours to complete and includes video content and individual activities to improve application of concepts and strategies presented. During today's training, we will do a quick Trauma 101 overview. We'll talk about why you should be trauma-informed as a CASA volunteer. We'll also talk about the 5 B's and attachment theory, the brain and body's response to trauma, and then we'll get into the TBRI framework, overviewing connecting, empowering, and correcting strategies and principles. And then we'll spend some time doing a scenario activity so that you can get some practice applying TBRI. And then we'll talk about other ways that you can continue your trauma-informed practice education. If you have not already, please pause this video now so that you can review Building a Region of Resilience, Northwest Georgia's A Case for an Informed Approach, Trauma, Brain Development, Behavior, and Resilience video series parts 1 and 2. You can use the QR code on your screen to access those videos. The information in both videos is fundamental to this training. We suggest you review those videos in advance of completing this training. The training videos in the series had participants explore how trauma, brain development, behavior, and resilience are deeply connected. We started by grounding ourselves in what trauma actually is, not just the event, but the impact it leaves on a person's sense of safety, connection, and control. We named the different types of trauma: acute, chronic, and complex, and we recognized how common trauma really is in our communities. That understanding helps us shift from judgment to curiosity, from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. Acute trauma comes from a single overwhelming event that threatens a person's physical or emotional safety. Examples of acute trauma include a car accident, a sudden loss, a natural disaster, or a violent incident. Acute trauma can leave lasting effects, especially if the person doesn't have support or predictable care afterwards. Chronic trauma results from repeated or prolonged exposure to highly stressful or harmful experiences. Examples of this include ongoing abuse, long-term neglect, community violence, or persistent bullying. Chronic trauma often leads to hypervigilance, difficulty trusting others, and challenges with regulation. Complex trauma occurs when a person experiences multiple, varied, or layered traumatic events, often beginning in childhood and often involving caregivers or trusted adults within their lives. Complex trauma affects how people see themselves, how they relate to others, and how they navigate the world. Complex trauma is complex because it has no end or beginning, and people experiencing this type of trauma don't know when they're going to get relief or when to expect the next traumatic experience. And finally, there's vicarious trauma. This happens when someone is exposed to another's trauma, often through caregiving or professional roles. Examples of this include you as a CASA volunteer, social workers, teachers, medical staff, or anyone supporting people in crisis. Vicarious trauma is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of deep empathy and proximity to suffering. These 4 types of trauma help us understand why people respond the way they do. They remind us that behavior is often a survival response and not necessarily a choice. And they guide us towards trauma-informed practices that center safety, connection, and empowerment. From there in the video, we moved into the brain and how experiences, especially overwhelming ones, shape the architecture of brain development. The video talked about the stress response system, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex, and how trauma can make regulation harder. This helps us see behavior not as defiance or dysfunction, but as a survival response. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn These aren't choices, they're adaptations. The videos went on to talk about the ACEs study, which showed us something both startling and deeply important. Early adversity is far more common than we once understood, and it has a powerful long-term impact on health, behavior, and well-being. Researchers found that the more adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, a person has, the higher their risk for challenges like chronic disease, mental health struggles, substance use, and difficulty in relationships. But the study also revealed a critical truth. ACEs are not destiny. Supportive relationships, predictable environments, and positive experience can buffer the effects of adversity and help people heal. The ACEs research gives us a shared language for understanding trauma and a roadmap for building resilience through connection, safety, and compassion. The videos also explored the cognitive behavioral triangle, noticing how thoughts, feelings, and behaviors interact. When someone's nervous system is activated, their thinking narrows, their emotions intensify, and their behavior follows suit. Understanding this triangle gives us a compassionate lens for interpreting what we see. Then the videos shift towards resilience. They introduce PACEs, or positive adult and child experiences, and the protective factors that buffer the effects of adversity. This is where hope lives. Even one stable, nurturing relationship can change a child's trajectory. Resilience isn't about being tough, it's about having support, connection, and predictable care. The video also talked about trauma-informed care and the principles that guide it: safety, trustworthiness, choice, collaboration, and empowerment. These aren't just ideas, they're practices. They show up in how we greet someone, how we set expectations, how we offer options, and how we repair when harm happens. And finally, the videos explored scaffolding, the temporary supports we offer to help someone move from dysregulation to stability, from overwhelm to capability. And scaffolding is how we help people build skills without taking over. It's how we model regulation, co-create solutions, and strengthen autonomy. We covered what trauma is, so why does it matter? When someone has lived through overwhelming or unpredictable experiences, their nervous system learns to stay on alert, scanning for danger, bracing for impact, and preparing to survive. That's what we often call survival mode, and it's not a choice. It's a pattern shaped by past experiences. The challenge is that the body can keep reacting to old threats even when the current moment is safe. That's why helping people anchor in the present is so powerful. When we offer calm voices, predictable routines, grounding strategies, and genuine connection, we help the nervous system recognize that it is safe now. Anchoring in the present doesn't erase the past, but it gives the brain and body a chance to settle, regulate, and respond rather than react. Being trauma-informed means we commit to seeing behavior through a trauma-wise lens. It means we slow down, we offer choice, and we build connection. It means we focus on strengths and not deficits. And it means we recognize that every interaction, every moment of safety, every moment of compassion can be a building block for long-term resilience. In today's training, we recognize that trauma shows up in many forms, not just individual events. Developmental trauma emerges when adversity disrupts a child's growth and sense of safety. Relational trauma occurs when the people who are supposed to provide care instead create fear, instability, or harm. Historical trauma reflects the collective wounds carried by communities who have endured oppression or violence over generations. That connects directly to generational trauma, where the impacts of adversity are passed down through family systems. We also name collective trauma, the shared shock communities experience after disasters, violence, or social upheaval, much like what we all experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Systemic trauma arises when policies, institutions, or structures create ongoing harm, something many of the families in our CASA network have experienced. And finally, race-based trauma acknowledges the emotional, physical, and psychological toll of racism and discrimination. Naming these categories helps us see the full landscape of trauma and respond with deeper compassion and clarity. When we talk about applying a trauma-informed approach, we're not just talking about new programs or policies. We're talking about shifting the deeper structures that shape how people in the organization behave as they work towards the mission. This model on screen, created by FSG, shows that organizational change happens across 3 levels. At the deepest, implicit level, we have mental models, the beliefs and assumptions that quietly drive decisions and behavior. When mental models shift, everything else can shift with them. A change in perception or understanding changes our approach, and that's often where the most transformative work begins. So if we believe that challenging behavior is an indication of distress or an unmet need, then we respond differently. We don't double down on compliance. We seek to meet the need and support them in meeting expectations. At the semi-explicit level, our mental model influences our relationships, connections, and power dynamics. It influences who we seek out and enter into a relationship with, who gets to be heard, and who holds power and makes decisions, and how we enter into trust and build trust in relationships. At the explicit level, we see the things that are easiest to name: policies, practices, and resource flows. It's where we choose to put our time, our talent, and our treasure, the money, people, and information we have at our disposal. Our mental model also influences how we write policy and how we interpret policy in day-to-day practice. When we look at healing through the lens of trauma-informed care, we can see that every child and every adult is on a kind of hero's journey. It begins with a call to adventure, when a child's early experiences create challenges they never asked for. Developmental trauma, relational breaks, fear, or unmet needs push them into a world that feels unpredictable. Their nervous system learns to survive, not to thrive. In the hero's journey, the next step is meeting a guide, someone who offers tools, wisdom, and safety. As trauma-informed providers, we become that guide. We offer presence, attunement, and felt safety. We show the child that they don't have to walk alone. We meet physical and emotional needs so their body can settle and their brain can come back online. And we teach skills with compassion, structure, and predictability, not punishment. Every hero faces trials. And for children with trauma histories, those trials often show up as behaviors that look confusing or challenging to us. But because we're trauma-informed, we understand that those behaviors are communication. They're communicating a survival strategy shaped by past experience. Our role is not to eliminate the trials, but to walk with the child through them, offering co-regulation, choice, and voice. And then comes the transformation. In the hero's journey, this is the moment when the hero discovers new strengths. In our work, transformation happens when a child begins to trust that safety is possible, that their needs matter, and that relationships can be healing rather than harmful. Their nervous system learns new patterns, and they develop and grow. And finally, the hero returns home, not necessarily to a place, but to a new sense of self. Home is the child's growing ability to regulate, connect, and choose, to be in healthy relationship with other human beings. It's the moment when they can say, "I'm safe now," and their body believes it. Healing becomes not a destination, but a journey they can continue with confidence, supported by relationships that honor their dignity and worth. In the end, they have grown and developed and are better able to move forward with confidence as a result of their journey. When we talk about relational trauma, we're talking about experiences that shape the whole person, not just behavior, but brain, biology, body, belief, and the way someone moves through the world. Most of our kids in care have experienced some form of relational trauma. And as you can see from the 5 B's of relational trauma handout, stressful experiences can cause the brain to organize around survival, that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, making it harder to access learning, creativity, and connection. Those same experiences affect biology, keeping the stress response system activated and impacting things like immunity, digestion, sleep, heart rate, and memory. They also shape the body, changing how a person senses the world and how they experience their own physical state. When we look at behavior through the lens of a relational trauma, we're not just seeing actions, we're seeing the nervous system trying to survive. Stressful experiences shape the developing brain around survival, and when a child or youth is operating from that state, regulation becomes much harder. Their biology is activated, their body feels unsafe, their sensory world may feel overwhelming or confusing. All of that shows up externally as behavior. This is why trauma impacted behavior can look like aggression, withdrawal, shutdown, perfectionism, defiance, or even overcompliance. These aren't choices, they're adaptations. Behavior is the language of unmet needs. Every outburst, every refusal, every shutdown is a signal or a clue that something inside the child needs support, connection, or regulation. When we understand behavior this way, our role shifts. Instead of asking what's wrong with them, we start asking what's the need behind their behavior. Instead of reacting to the surface, we're responding to the story underneath. And instead of trying to control behavior, we help the child build the skills and safety they need to regulate, relate, and recover. This is at the heart of trauma-informed practice, seeing behavior not as a problem to fix, but as a communication to understand. For this reason, it's important to understand attachment, how it is formed, and the different styles of attachment that can be formed in childhood. Attachment begins in infancy with a simple cycle. When an infant has a need, they signal that need, maybe by crying or being fussy, and a caregiver responds. They determine if the baby needs food, a new diaper, or attention. When that response is consistent, attuned, and comforting, the child learns that people are safe and their needs will be met. Over time, this creates secure attachment, a positive model of self, of others, and of healthy relationships. But when the cycle is inconsistent, intrusive, or unpredictable, when the cycle is repeatedly broken, the child learns something different. If caregivers respond sometimes but not others, the child may develop anxious, preoccupied attachment, a pattern shaped by a fear of abandonment and a negative model of self. If caregivers are emotionally unavailable, dismissive, or uncomfortable with closeness, the child may form dismissive avoidant attachment, a pattern where the independence feels safer than connection and the child develops a negative model of others. And when caregiving is frightening, chaotic, or linked to trauma, the attachment cycle breaks down entirely. The child experiences both a desire for closeness and a fear of it, leading to fearful, avoidant, or disorganized attachment. A push-pull pattern rooted in confusion and unmet needs and the desire to love their caregiver while simultaneously being afraid of them. These styles aren't personality traits, they're adaptations to childhood experiences. They reflect how the attachment cycle was experienced early on, and they can change and move toward secure attachment through regular exposure to safety, consistency, and healing relationships. Understanding your own attachment style helps you recognize how you show up in relationships, especially under stress. Attachment patterns shape how you interpret others' behavior, how you offer support, and how you respond when conflict or dysregulation arises. When you know your style, you can notice your triggers, your default reactions, and the moments when past experience might be influencing your present interactions or actions. This self-awareness strengthens trauma-informed practice because it allows you to stay regulated, offer attunement, and create safety even when someone else is struggling. Identifying your own attachment style isn't about labeling yourself, it's about building the insight needed to respond with compassion, clarity, and connection. You can access this short assessment using the QR code on the screen. Pause now to complete the assessment. In trauma-informed care, it's important to understand how the brain works during stress. Our attachment style dictates how our brain operates during times of stress. In trauma-informed care, it's important to understand how the brain works during these times. The downstairs brain is a part responsible for survival. It is where fight, flight, freeze, or fawn originate. It reacts fast, keeps us safe, and takes over when the nervous system senses danger. The upstairs brain handles problem solving, empathy, regulation, and decision making. We call this higher order thinking. It's where learning and connection happen. When someone has a trauma history, their downstairs brain can activate quickly, even in situations that are actually safe. They're often transported back to the traumatic experience with all of its sensations, making it hard for the person to recognize they're safe in the moment and keep their upstairs brain engaged. We call this flipping their lid. When someone's lid is flipped, it means they may not be able to access the upstairs brain skills that we expect, like reasoning, listening, or self-control. Knowing this helps us shift our approach. Instead of asking, why are they acting like this? We ask, what does your nervous system need right now? What's the behavior trying to communicate? This perspective is at the heart of trauma-informed care. It reminds us to focus on regulation before correction, connection before instruction, and safety before anything else. When we help someone calm their downstairs brain, we open the door to the upstairs brain to come back online, and that's where healing, learning, and relationship become possible. We can keep the upstairs brain engaged by applying as many protective factors as possible. Protective factors are the supports in a child's life that help buffer the impact of trauma and lead to healthier outcomes. Two children can face the same risks, but the one who feels loved, valued, and supported will have a very different trajectory. These protective factors include things like supportive relationships, stable caregiving, community safety, and access to resources. For CASA volunteers, this slide is a reminder that you can be a protective factor. Each green check mark indicates natural ways that CASAs can provide protective factors. Your consistent presence, advocacy, and attuned connection can offer a child something they may not have elsewhere. Someone who shows up, listens, and believes in their worth. Even small moments of stability and care can strengthen resilience and help a child move towards safer, healthier outcomes. So let's talk about how you can get that done. For the remainder of this training, we're going to focus in on TBRI, the Trust-Based Relational Intervention Model. TBRI was created by Karen Purvis and Dan Siegel from Texas Christian University's Karen Purvis Institute for Child Development. Let's watch this short video featuring Karen Purvis. TBRI reminds us that behavior is communication, that regulation comes before instruction, and that healing happens through connections. As you watch this video, notice how each principle shows up in everyday interactions and how small, attuned moments can create big shifts in a child's sense of trust.
TBRI, Trust-Based Relational Intervention, has at its core building a trusting relationship. It has 3 sets of principles, and they look at the child as a whole. When you think about development, the baby cries, and I say, yes, I will comfort you. And so this child learns that they have a voice. They learn trust, which is the lesson of the first year of life. I can trust. There are so many children from hard places, and for those children, their capacity to trust has been fiercely damaged. The brain chemistry of a child who cries and no one comes is dramatically altered. The child with a history of trauma or loss or abuse has no hope of healing without a nurturing relationship. In every way that I make time and space, that I give touch, eye contact, and I give words, I am going to empower this child to go back to the beginning of what he or she should have experienced in the arms of a loving parent that said, when you cry, I will come. The phenomenal thing about a trust-based intervention is, as we connect to this child, as we build safety, we actually change the brain chemistry. We change the wiring of the brain. This is really the heart and soul of all that we are and all that we do. Do I look into the child's eyes? Do I touch their arm when I talk to them? When they talk to me, do I stop what I'm doing and talk to them? This is the essence of mindfulness. The excitatory chemicals about I'm afraid, I'm hungry, I'm cold, those are balanced when the caregiver comes and gives warmth. All regulation occurs first with an external regulator. So in the beginning, I regulate all. They're cold, I bring warmth. They're crying, I bring myself. And out of my regulation, their brain develops capacity for self-regulation. If this child didn't have this experience, that child doesn't feel safe. This chemistry can be altered, first by knowing they're safe, second by nutrient-rich foods, third by my environmental regulation of that child's emotion, and fourth by appropriate exercise. So we can balance brain chemistry by creating a holistic environment. We clearly have to deal with behavior. Correcting means showing a child the right behavior, praising him when he gets it, and showing it to him until he can get it right, and showing him with no fear and no shame so that he builds success, not a greater sense of failure. So the message of hope for our families is that we can help our children to dramatic levels of healing. We simply have to be devoted to it and be willing to invest what it's going to take.
For a long time, the traditional approach to challenging behavior assumed that kids were choosing to misbehave, that their actions were willful disobedience. In that model, adults focus on compliance, consequences, and correcting behavior first and foremost. The goal was control, not connection. But when we look at behavior through a trauma-informed lens, we see something different. Many children aren't choosing to act out. They're communicating stress, fear, unmet needs, or survival responses. TBRI shifts us away from what's wrong with you to what do you need. Instead of starting with correction, TBRI begins with connection and empowerment so the nervous system can settle, we can re-engage the upstairs brain, and the child can access the skills we hope to teach. This shift transforms the way we support healing, learning, and trust, but only if we recognize that our default setting is to force compliance. We have to reset our default to striving for a healthy connection and proactively meeting needs. TBRI is built on the understanding that many challenging behaviors are actually survival responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. These responses come from the downstairs brain, where the nervous system reacts to stress automatically, not intentionally. What makes TBRI unique is that each of its 3 principles is scientifically designed to meet a child exactly where their nervous system is. Through connecting, we calm the relational alarm system. Attunement, eye contact, voice tone, and presence help deactivate fight and fawn responses by signaling safety and belonging. Through empowering, we support the body and brain. Meeting the physical and sensory needs reduces fight and freeze responses by stabilizing the stress response system and helping the child regain regulation. And through correcting, we teach skills once the nervous system is ready. This prevents re-triggering survival mode and helps the child build new patterns for problem solving, communication, and self-regulation. TBRI doesn't stop survival responses. It understands them. It gives us a roadmap to help children move from protection to connection, from reactivity to regulation, and from surviving to healing. Trauma-wise care is based on 3 pillars: safety, connection, and coping. Attachment and attunement are key to creating resilience, especially in children. Supportive relationships give kids in hard places the safe space to practice life skills and get positive experiences in self-regulation, efficacy, and positive self-esteem. Warm, responsive relationships and interaction build child's brains and help them to learn to self-regulate their behavior. Securely attached children build positive internal working models of others as trustworthy and of themselves as valuable and effective. Connections, relationships, and attachment are vital for the development of the brain and mind, support learning at an anatomical, physiological, psychological, social, and environmental level. So we begin with safety. It's important to note the difference between being safe and feeling safe. We have to consider the physical and emotional. Does the environment feel safe, accessible, and welcoming? Are we seen as trustworthy? Are goals and related procedures clear, communicated, and consistent? Do choice and control exist in the environment? Do those we serve know their options, have choice whenever possible, and experience logical consequences for their choices? Is there a sense of collaboration? Are kids invited to contribute meaningfully regarding their own goals and CASA-related activities? Is there empowerment and high expectations? Are kids' strengths recognized, and do volunteers convey genuine optimism in their ability to continuously grow and meet goals? Trust-based relational intervention is a caregiving framework built on 3 core principles: connecting, empowering, and correcting. Together, these principles help children heal from trauma by meeting their needs, building felt safety, and strengthening relationships. These strategies give implementers practical actions they can use to connect, empower, and correct. At their core, they build felt safety, healthy connection, and self-regulation. The connecting principles remind us that healing starts with relationships. TBRI asks us to practice mindful awareness, being aware of ourselves, aware of the child, and aware of the situation. This helps us notice our own regulation, understands the child's cues, and respond with intention rather than reaction. From that awareness, we use engagement strategies that signal safety to the nervous system: healthy touch, warm eye contact, voice quality, behavior matching, and playful interaction. These small relational cues help shift a child out of survival mode and into connection. Together, mindful awareness and engagement strategies create the foundation for trust, the heart of TBRI, and the doorway to healing. So let's take a deep dive into some of these strategies. Healthy touch is a regulated, respectful, and attuned way of using physical contact to support connection and calm the nervous system. It's based on the science that gentle, appropriate touch can lower stress hormones, strengthen attachment, and help a child shift out of survival responses. It is important to note that some of our CASA kids have not had complete autonomy over their bodies, and so it's incredibly important for us to ask for permission before touching a child. If a child can respond to a yes or no question, then we should ask permission before high fives, before giving hugs, or before touching them in any way. Healthy touch is always child-led and consent-based. It might look like a high five, a fist bump, a pat on the shoulder, or offering a hand to hold if a child reaches for it. The goal is to communicate safety and presence, never pressure. When used with mindful awareness, healthy touch becomes a powerful regulation tool. It helps the child feel grounded, supported, and connected, making it easier for them to access the relational and learning parts of the brain. In TBRI, touch isn't about control, it's about co-regulation and trust. In TBRI, warm eye contact is a gentle, attuned way of signaling safety and connection. It's not about staring or demanding attention. It's about offering a soft, regulated gaze that helps a child's nervous system feel seen rather than threatened. Warm eye contact activates the social engagement system, supporting co-regulation and helping shift the child out of survival responses. Because many children with trauma histories have learned that eye contact can be unsafe or unpredictable, TBRI treats it as an optional and child-led experience. We offer it, but we never force it. A quick glance, a soft smile, or a moment of shared attention can communicate presence, attunement, and trust. Used alongside other connecting strategies like healthy touch, behavior matching, and playful interaction, warm eye contact becomes a powerful tool for helping children feel safe enough to engage, learn, and connect. Voice quality is the intentional use of tone, pace, and volume to help a child's nervous system feel safe. A calm, warm, and regulated voice activates the social engagement system, the part of the brain that supports connection, co-regulation, and trust. When a child's in fight, flight, or freeze, their downstairs brain is scanning for threat. A harsh or loud tone can escalate that response, while a gentle, steady voice can bring a child back into regulation. Voice quality is also responsive, not performative. We match the moment. Soft and slow when a child is dysregulated, upbeat and playful when they're open to engagement, and firm but kind when offering structure. The goal is never control, it's attunement. Our voice becomes a tool for communicating safety, predictability, and presence. Used alongside warm eye contact, healthy touch, and behavior matching, voice quality helps create the relational environment where healing and learning can happen. Behavior matching in TBRI is the practice of aligning your energy, posture, and emotional tone with the child's current state so their nervous system feels understood rather than overwhelmed. It's a regulation strategy rooted in the idea that children co-regulate before they self-regulate. When we match a child's behavior gently and intentionally, we communicate attunement. I see you, I'm with you, and you're safe. If a child is quiet and withdrawn, we soften our voice and slow our movements. If they're playful and open, we meet them with lightness and engagement. If they're dysregulated, we lower our intensity rather than escalating. If they're playing with toys, we play with similar toys, or we ask to play with them. If they're coloring a picture, we color a similar picture to theirs. If they're drawing a playground, we draw a playground. The idea is to help them recognize that we see them and that we are like them. It's not mimicry, and it's not about giving up structure. It's about meeting the child where they are so they can move toward regulation, connection, and eventually learning. And playful interaction in TBRI is the intentional use of lightness, humor, and gentle play to lower defensiveness and help a child's nervous system feel safe enough to connect. When kids are having fun, they are likely not afraid. Play activates the social engagement system, the part of the brain that supports curiosity, bonding, and regulation. For children who often live in survival mode, playful interaction can interrupt the stress response and create a bridge back to relationship. Playful interaction is never sarcastic, chaotic, or overwhelming. It's attuned. We offer a silly voice, a quick game, a shared laugh, or a playful challenge only when the child is open to it. If they're dysregulated, we keep it gentle and predictable. If they're withdrawn, we use soft, low-pressure play to invite connection. If they're already playful, we join them with matching energy. The goal isn't entertainment, it's co-regulation. Play helps the child feel safe, seen, and connected, which opens the door for learning, problem solving, and healing. When paired with behavior matching, voice quality, and warm eye contact, playful interaction becomes one of the most powerful tools for building trust. Now let's move on to the empowering principles. The empowering principles focus on helping children regulate their bodies and their environment so they stay connected, learn, and feel safe. TBRI divides these strategies into physiological and ecological supports, internal needs and external structures that work together to stabilize the nervous system. We teach self-regulation through internal process by helping children understand what's happening inside their bodies and giving them tools to calm their nervous system. Many children with trauma histories don't recognize early signs of dysregulation, so we teach them how to notice cues like tight muscles, fast breathing, or big emotions, and how to respond with grounding, breathing, or sensory strategies. We recognize and meet sensory needs. Trauma impacts how the brain processes sensory input. Some children are easily overwhelmed. Others seek extra stimulation. Meeting sensory needs might include offering fidgets, movement breaks, quiet spaces, weighted items, or predictable sensory routines. When sensory needs are met, the child's stress response decreases and regulation becomes possible. We do this to build self-awareness and the child's ability to address their own needs without us in the future. We recognize that hydration impacts cognition and behavior. Dehydration can mimic dysregulation. It shows up as irritability, fatigue, difficulty focusing, and emotional reactivity. Offering water proactively helps stabilize the body and supports the brain's ability to stay calm and engaged. It's a simple but powerful regulation tool. Kids should be drinking water at least every 2 hours. It's a good idea to have bottles of water handy while you're in court, especially if you expect to be there for quite some time. We recognize that blood glucose or sugar levels impact cognition and behavior. Low blood sugar can trigger a survival response. Snacks with protein and complex carbs help maintain steady energy and reduce emotional volatility. Kids need to take in as many calories as they expend in energy in order to ensure they stay regulated. TBRI encourages offering snacks before behavior escalates, not after, because regulation begins with meeting physical needs and doing so proactively. We recognize the importance of sleep. Many children in care experience disrupted sleep, which affects mood, attention, and stress tolerance. While we can't control every aspect of a child's sleep environment, we can advocate for routines, calming practices, and predictable rhythms that support rest. Sleep is foundational to regulation. We recognize the importance of movement. Movement helps release stored stress and regulate the nervous system. Activities like stretching, walking, dancing, or playful interactions help children shift out of survival mode. Movement is especially important for kids who struggle with hyperactivity or shutdown responses. It's also important to recognize that kids, the younger they are, have a hard time sitting still for long periods of time, similar to what happens in a courtroom. And so finding ways and opportunities to allow kids to have movement so that they can be still when we need them to are important. For our ecological strategies, we are focused on the external environment. So we teach self-regulation through external processes. External supports help children regulate by shaping the environment around them. This includes predictable structures, supportive relationships, and clear expectations. When the environment feels safe and consistent, the child's internal regulation becomes easier. We recognize the power of routines and rituals. Predictability reduces anxiety. Routines help children know what to expect, and rituals like greetings, transitions, or shared moments build connection and felt safety. These structures anchor the child's day and reduce the likelihood of dysregulation. We understand the disruptive nature of transitions. Transitions are hard for many children, especially those with trauma histories. TBRI encourages preparing children ahead of time, offering warnings, using visual cues, and keeping transitions calm and predictable. Supporting transitions helps prevent a fight or flight response. We scaffold self-regulation through activities. Scaffolding means breaking tasks into manageable steps and offering support until the child can do it independently. This might look like modeling, co-regulating, or practicing skills together until they're able to implement the skill on their own. Scaffolding helps children build confidence and reduces frustration that can lead to dysregulation. I have some great ideas for how you can capitalize on opportunities to teach regulation. This slide highlights simple, powerful ways to help children learn to regulate their bodies and emotions. Breathing exercises like 4-3-5 pattern slow the heart rate and signal to the nervous system that it's safe. We teach kids to breathe in deeply for a count of 4, hold for a count of 3, and then completely empty their diaphragm for a count of 5. Doing this repeatedly for several minutes can re-engage the upstairs brain and anchor a child in their body. The five senses calm down grounding technique helps kids shift out of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn by anchoring them in the present moment by naming what they see, what they feel, what they hear, what they smell, and what they taste. You can also do that in a very playfully engaged way. We can also support regulation by naming feelings, both physical sensations and where they manifest inside kids' bodies, and the connectedness to their emotions. When children learn to identify what's happening inside their bodies, they gain the vocabulary to talk about it and to advocate to have their needs met. Remember, if behavior is vocabulary, if we give kids actual vocabulary, then they don't have to communicate through behavior. They're able to articulate what they're feeling and what they need. Finally, we help them notice whether they're over or understimulated. Many behaviors we see are actually reactions to unconscious sensory needs and not thoughtful choices. When we understand the child's level of stimulation, we can offer what they need, either calming input, movement, quiet, or connection. Each of these strategies teaches children that regulation is possible and that they don't have to do it alone. Now let's get into when it's necessary to correct behavior. The correcting principles help teach us new skills and guide behavior in ways that protect connection and regulation. TBRI divides these strategies into proactive and responsive approaches. What we do before behavior escalates and how we respond when it does. First, let's talk about the concept of can't versus won't. A core idea in TBRI is distinguishing between the I can'ts and the I won'ts. Many behaviors look like defiance, but they're actually I can't moments, when the child's nervous system is overwhelmed and they cannot access the skills we expect. TBRI helps us respond with curiosity instead of judgment and ask, is this a skill problem or a stress problem? And that shifts the way we respond. Our proactive strategies include practicing positive social skills. When children are calm and alert, we intentionally teach the skills they'll need later: sharing, asking for help, using words, problem solving, and managing frustration. Practicing these skills before stress shows up builds confidence and reduces the likelihood of dysregulation. We share power and give yeses as a rule. Sharing power means offering choices, collaboration, and voice. Giving yeses, safe, appropriate affirmations, helps reduce power struggles and builds trust. It doesn't mean being a pushover or allowing a child to do whatever they want. Instead, it means allowing them to take control when appropriate and still holding them to a high standard. When children feel respected and included, their nervous system stays more regulated and open to guidance. The experience builds their muscle for autonomy and self-efficacy. We use life value terms to help build an understanding of behavioral concepts. These are simple relational phrases like with respect, use your words, or gentle hands. They teach core values in a way that's predictable and easy to remember. Life value terms help children internalize expectations without shame or fear. The key is to consistently and repeatedly use age-appropriate, easily understood terms and phrases. We create behavioral scripts to help practice appropriate behavior. Scripts give children structured opportunities during challenging moments. A redo is a chance to try again with support, reinforcing learning instead of punishment, and giving an opportunity for the caregiver to praise the appropriate behavior. Scripts help children practice the behavior we want, not just stop the behavior we don't want. Again, giving them the experience of getting it right. So let's look at the responsive strategies. These are the things that we employ in times when behavior has escalated to the need of correction. The ideal response stands for immediate, direct, efficient, action-based, and leveled at the behavior. It's a way of responding that keeps correction short, calm, and connected. Ideal helps prevent escalation and support the child's ability to return to regulation quickly. The levels of response in TBRI teach us to match our response to the child's level of dysregulation, not overreacting, not under-responding, and always protecting our connection. I'll expand on this in the closing section. The IDEAL acronym guides how we respond in the moment so correction stays connected, regulated, and effective. We respond immediately, right away while the behavior is happening so the child can connect the correction to the moment. Delayed reactions can feel unpredictable or unsafe. If we are mindfully attuned to the child and what they are doing, we should be able to address challenging behavior within seconds of its occurring. We are direct. We keep the interaction simple and clear. No lectures, no shame, no emotional intensity. Directness helps the child understand what's needed without confusion. We're efficient. Corrections should be brief. We use the least number of words necessary to communicate our expectations. Long explanations overwhelm the nervous system. Efficiency keeps the child in the window of tolerance. What we do is action-based. We focus on what the child can do, offering choices, redos, or simple steps. Actions help the child practice the skill instead of shutting down. It ensures that they have the experience of getting it right and the opportunity to be praised for doing it the way we have guided them to. And yes, we celebrate them getting it right even when we have orchestrated the scenario. And we level at the behavior, not the child. We match the intensity of our response to the intensity of the behavior. Small behaviors get small corrections. Bigger behaviors get firmer, but still regulated guidance. This prevents escalation and protects trust. So let's talk about that level of behavior or the level of response to match behavior. TBRI teaches 3 levels of response, each matched to the child's level of dysregulation. Playful engagement is when the child is only slightly off track. We use light, playful cues, a gentle reminder, a silly voice, or a quick redo. Play keeps the interaction safe and prevents escalation. In a level 2 structured response, if playful engagement doesn't work, we move to calm structure using clear expectations, choices, compromises, or life value terms. This level offers support and structure without intensity. In the calming response, level 3, when the child is dysregulated, we shift away from correction entirely and focus on regulation. Again, it's important for us to recognize at this level, the child is in survival mode and has flipped their lid, and we must bring them back to calm before we can introduce any corrective action. So we focus on breathing, grounding, sensory support, or co-regulation. We don't teach skills until the nervous system is ready, and we attempt to return to playful engagement as quickly as possible. Should a child's behavior require protection of themselves or others, then at this point, a CASA volunteer should connect with an expert trained in these techniques. Your CASA advocacy director or coordinator or the local CASA office can help you identify who's best suited to meet that child's needs. Now let's talk about how you scaffold emotional regulation. Scaffolding is the idea that children learn best when an adult provides just enough support for them to succeed at a task they haven't mastered yet. In TBRI, this concept becomes the foundation for how we teach regulation. Many children with trauma histories don't yet have the internal scaffolding they need to calm their bodies, name their feelings, or manage their stress. So instead of expecting self-regulation, we offer co-regulation. We stay calm, present, and attuned so the child can borrow from our regulation. Over time, as they practice this with us, those skills move from the proximal zone into the mastered zone. The temporary support we provide becomes their internal structure. Scaffolding reminds us that regulation is taught, not demanded, and that healing happens through shared emotional stability, one supported step at a time. Let's take a moment to apply what we've learned. Just like the kids we served, in order to implement new skills, we need to practice. The next part of this training is activity-based. You will analyze 2 real-world trauma-informed caregiving scenarios from the scenario handout. Each scenario represents a different survival response and shows how a child's history shapes their behavior in the moment. Your task is to examine each situation through a survival lens and design a coaching plan for the foster parents using the 3 principles: connecting, empowering, and correcting from TBRI. First, choose 2 scenarios and read them closely. Pay attention to the child's backstory, the pattern of behavior, the caregiver's action, and the child's reactions. These details help you identify what the child's nervous system is experiencing and which survival response is being activated. Next, consider and note down on paper what the child needed in that moment. What cues of danger did their brain detect? What past experiences might have shaped their interpretation of the caregiver's words or actions? Use that understanding to build a trauma-responsive plan. Then outline 3 parts of your coaching plan. For connecting, identify how the caregiver can offer presence, attunement, and felt safety before addressing the behavior. For empowering, think about the child's internal and external regulation needs, their sensory, support, routine, transitions, hydration, movement, or co-regulation. For correcting, choose proactive and responsive strategies that fit the child's regulation level. Consider scripts, choices, redos, life value terms, or the ideal response. As you design your plans, remember that the goal isn't to fix the behavior. It's to understand the need beneath it and help caregivers respond in ways that build trust and regulation over time. Please pause now to complete the plans for 2 scenarios. Each scenario should take between 10 and 15 minutes to complete. Welcome back, and thanks for taking the time to apply what you've learned in today's training. Let's process what you've learned. Take a moment to consider what stood out to you in the child's backstory or pattern of behavior. Why do you think it stood out to you? What cues suggested the child was in survival mode? What did the caregiver do, and how might that action have been interpreted by the child's nervous system? What TBRI principles, connecting, empowering, or correcting, seem most relevant here? What might the caregiver need to understand about the child's history in order to respond effectively? What does this scenario teach us about the difference between can'ts and won'ts? What empowering strategies might help prevent future escalations? What correcting strategies would fit the child's regulation level as described in this scenario? And finally, what would you include in a coaching plan for this foster parent? Although we won't have enough time in this video to review each scenario in detail, I would like to provide at least one suggested action step for each of these scenarios. In the Marcus and then transition trigger scenario, Marcus, an 11-year-old, exhibits the fight response when instructed to stop playing his video game. I trust you came up with many proactive and responsive options for Marcus's caregivers. I hope the focus was on scaffolding transition. In addition to verbally setting expectations and giving multiple warnings as you approach the end time, I would suggest setting a standard time allotted for video game play, maybe 30 to 60 minutes. To help Marcus track his time, set an egg timer. To help him with closure so that Marcus can move on to the next activity, create a ritual of adding today's gaming accomplishments on a leaderboard, a whiteboard that keeps track of whatever stats he thinks are most important. Adding today's score to the leaderboard signifies the end of the game and the expectation that Marcus will move on to the next activity. In the Aaliyah and the constructive feedback scenario, Aaliyah, age 8, has a history of being incredibly sensitive to correction, responding by finding a small space to hide until the perceived danger has passed. With Aaliyah, I would suggest focusing on meeting her where she is and focusing on connection and empowerment so that she can achieve felt safety. I would suggest her foster parents sit with her on the floor of the closet and don't insist she leave. They should reassure her that she is not in trouble and that homework mistakes happen to everyone. It's how we all learn. Help her name how she is feeling and where she is feeling it in her body. Help her find techniques to help her tolerate the discomfort until it passes. Consider a small safety item, a toy or stuffed animal, that she can hold, hug, or squeeze to help her channel the energy she's got that's contributing to her desire to flee. In the Emerson and the routine inquiry scenario, a 14-year-old Emerson has a history of checking out for long periods of time after a visit with his biological mother. Emerson could also benefit from helping to name his emotions and articulating how he feels about his biological mother and his new foster family. His guardians can use a wheel of emotions to help Emerson name his feelings silently until he is better able to say them out loud. At 14, Emerson has the vocabulary and writing skills to keep a journal or video blog so he can practice expressing himself and his feelings in healthy ways. They can also work together to develop code words that sum up how he is feeling or how a visit went. This is an example of a customized life value term. And finally, his foster parents should use low pressure when getting him to open up. They should be patient and allow him to start out expressing himself non-verbally until he is more comfortable and ready to move up to verbal communication. They should lean into the connecting strategies to create the felt safety he needs to open up. In Chloe and the Shared Meal, a very enterprising and overly helpful 6-year-old struggles in her new placement to accept care from her foster family. Her hypervigilance creates dysregulation in response to a typical family dinner. In addition to using connecting and empowering strategies to make Chloe feel safe and build a relationship with her new foster parents, she could benefit from a defined but age-appropriate role in the family. Giving Chloe a chore chart that includes the basic acts of daily living like taking a bath, brushing her teeth, and making her bed, and then tasks that support the entire family like setting the table, emptying the dishwasher, or taking out the trash, combined with gentle reminders that it's okay to be a kid and leave the adult responsibilities to them, can help channel Chloe's helpful energy. Structured conversation, like the best and worst of the day, or conversation starters at the dinner table, can also help her build connections with family members and help them all get to know one another better. In Jordan and the Gift Giving Moment, a 12-year-old, hopefully in a permanent home, self-sabotages by damaging a bike he was given as a gift to celebrate a milestone in his placement, a behavior he has a habit of exhibiting. As with other scenarios, Jordan needs to know that he is loved even in the face of his challenging behavior, and that he is not going anywhere. His foster dad can reinforce this message by spending time with Jordan repairing the bike. He can use the time working together to build a connection and explain why he gave Jordan the bike in the first place. He can share what he envisions for Jordan and his future in their newly formed family and invite Jordan to share his perspective and help create expectations for their future family together. The next time Jordan exhibits self-sabotaging behavior, his foster parents can ask for a pause to discuss how Jordan is feeling and what he is afraid of, and offer a redo or a scripted repair. Once addressed, the foster parents must commit to letting it go and not revisiting the incident again in the future. The next scenario is Brandon and the Hidden Stash, depicting a behavioral phenomenon in foster children related to hoarding food. It's vital to help remind 7-year-old Brandon's foster parents that because of his history of food scarcity, the stash is his emotional insurance policy. It represents safety and control over something he has likely never had control over, where his next meal will come from. This is a great example of how you can provide choices and say yes. The foster parents can work with Brandon to design a fun, personalized food basket to keep in his bedroom. It would only contain foods his parents deem appropriate, sealed and non-perishable. His parents would allow him to shop from the kitchen pantry on his own anytime the supplies get low. They would negotiate the total number of items the basket could contain and the restocking threshold. In return, Brandon can commit to throwing all wrappers and food trash in the kitchen garbage. Over time, he can be encouraged to donate some of his excess snacks to the local food pantry or community food bank, helping him recognize that he is no longer living with the deficit and practice giving back to his community. Next was Sarah's automatic denial. This 10-year-old who has a history of harsh punishment for minor infractions tells a tall tale when she's asked about spilling the milk on the counter. Sarah's history of lying is a maladaptive coping mechanism formed out of fearful attachment. As with all of our cases, Sarah should be made to feel safe in her placement, and her foster parents should lean into the levels of response, measuring their response against the level of the challenging behavior. They can start with playful engagement, remembering that Sarah struggles to feel safe, especially when facing correction. They can challenge the lie playfully by saying something like, "Wow, that's a fantastically imaginative story, but I'm pretty sure that's not what happened. I see the crumbs on your face, so I'm pretty sure you were involved. How about you tell me how it really happened, and then after we can color a storybook about your clumsy cat and magical milk cup." She can empower Sarah by helping her channel her creative skills into more productive ways and using redos to break the habit of telling tall tales when she's afraid of being punished. And finally, Alex in the courtroom overload, featuring a 17-year-old impacted by systemic trauma who reacts with a combination of dissociation and aggressive defiance in the courtroom. He checks out leading up to the court experience and is easily triggered once in the setting. An attempt to get his opinion results in an emotional outburst. Alex needs all the connection and emotional support we've discussed for the other scenarios, and his case presents a great opportunity to employ behavioral scripts and practice. Alex could be empowered by being introduced to the key players in the courtroom prior to his appearance, whenever that's possible. You and his foster parents can work with him to practice what he will be asked and his responses, and including how to articulate what he needs and what he wants multiple times leading up to his appearance. This can be supported by a written script, which he leads in putting down on paper so it can be read on his behalf if he gets too overwhelmed to participate. A video recording can both help him practice and ensure his voice is heard, even if he is too dysregulated during his appearance to contribute. Trauma-informed practice isn't a one-time training. It's a professional posture that requires ongoing learning, reflection, and skill building. The children and families we serve bring complex histories, diverse cultural experiences, and evolving needs. To show up well for them, we need to keep expanding our understanding of trauma, regulation, resilience, and what it means to heal. Continuing education helps us deepen our empathy, sharpen our strategies, and stay aligned with the most current research in brain science, attachment, and child development. Just like any other specialized skill, trauma-responsive caregiving requires practice for proficiency. Strategies like co-regulation, ideal response, scaffolding, and sensory-based supports are effective only when caregivers have repeated opportunities to rehearse, reflect, and integrate them into daily routines. Ongoing practice and training gives us the space to do that, to move from knowing the concept to living the practice. As we wrap up today's training, I want to bring us back to the heart of trauma-informed practice. Children's behavior makes sense when we understand their stories. Every scenario we explored showed us how a child's nervous system is doing exactly what it was trained to do in order to survive. And every TBRI strategy we practice today reminds us that healing doesn't happen through correction alone. It happens through connection, empowerment, and consistent, compassionate, and loving guidance. We looked at how connecting strategies create felt safety, how empowering strategies stabilize the body and environment, and how correcting strategies teach skills without shame. We explored scaffolding and co-regulation, recognizing that children borrow our calm long before they can create their own. And we have practiced the ideal response and levels of response, learning how to match our support to the child's regulation state. But proficiency in trauma responsive care doesn't come from a single training. It grows through repetition, reflection, and continued learning. That's why ongoing education matters. Programs like TBRI Global Georgia deepen your skills across all three TBRI principles. The caregiver training provides a deep dive into TBRI, and caregivers learn the connecting, empowering, and correcting principles in detail, practice scripts and strategies, and explore how trauma impacts the brain and behavior. The full 24-hour series builds confidence and competence, helping caregivers respond to survival behaviors with clarity and compassion. Connections Matter Georgia strengthens your understanding of how relationships shape the brain. It focuses on how relationships shape the developing brain and gives caregivers, educators, and community members understanding of the science of resilience and the power of everyday interactions. Participants learn practical ways to strengthen protective factors, build supportive environments, and reduce the impact of trauma across systems. The KSU Trauma-Informed Microcredential builds advanced expertise in biology, culture, policy, and restorative practice. This microcredential series offers a structured, university-level pathway for volunteers who want to deepen their expertise. Courses cover trauma's impact on biology, psychosocial development, cultural responsiveness, policy implications, and restorative practices and policies. Each badge builds specialized knowledge that strengthens trauma-informed leadership and practice across the agency. The Community Resiliency Model equips you with practical, body-based tools for regulation and resilience. CRIM teaches practical regulation skills that help individuals track their nervous system and return to the resilient zone. This training is especially helpful for caregivers and frontline workers who need simple, teachable tools for grounding, stabilization, and stress recovery. CRIM strengthens both personal resilience and the ability to model and co-regulate with children. Continuing education isn't just professional development, it's an active care. Every new skill we learn becomes another way to help a child feel safe. Every training we attend strengthens our ability to respond instead of react, to connect instead of correct, and to build environments where healing is possible. Trauma-informed practice grows with us, and these trainings ensure we keep growing in the right direction. Each of these trainings adds another layer of support, another scaffold for you as the caregiver, advocate, and professional. The more we practice, the more confident we become, and the more confident we become, the more safety we can offer the children who need it the most. As always, the staff of Northeast Georgia CASA is here to help support you. Please reach out to your coordinator for support in implementing trauma-informed strategies. Thank you for your attention, your compassion, and your willingness to keep learning. The work you do matters, and every skill you strengthen becomes another pathway to healing for the children we serve.